You meditate every morning, you've read the books, you know about chakras, manifestation, and the power of now. You call yourself awakened, but let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you paid a bill without flinching? When was the last time someone cut you off in traffic and you responded with actual peace, not rehearsed patience? Your awakening is not tested on the meditation cushion. It's tested at the grocery store checkout. It's tested when your landlord raises the rent. It's tested when your mother calls and says the one thing that unravels you in seconds. Spiritual theater vs. real life. Most people confuse spiritual performance with spiritual transformation. They've built an entire identity around being conscious, but the moment life squeezes them, what leaks out is the same fear, the same reactivity, the same ego they swore they'd transcended. Today, we're going to dismantle the most dangerous illusion in the modern spiritual world, and by the end of this video, you'll know whether your awakening is real or just a beautiful costume you wear to feel special. The spiritual mask. There's a phenomenon psychologists call spiritual bypassing. It was first named by psychotherapist John Wellwood in 1984, and it describes something you've probably witnessed, maybe even done yourself. It's the use of spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with painful feelings, unresolved wounds, and real-life problems. Spiritual bypassing is a widespread tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues. Think about that for a moment. How many times have you told yourself everything happens for a reason when you were really just terrified to sit with your grief? How many times have you said, "I'm sending love and light to someone who genuinely wronged you, not because you'd forgiven them, but because confrontation felt too messy for your spiritual brand?" The mask of enlightenment is the hardest one to remove. Because it feels good, it feels noble, it feels evolved, but underneath it, the wounds are still festering, the anxiety is still humming, the anger is still burning. You've just learned to dress it in Sanskrit. Avoidance disguised as awakening. But here's where it gets truly dangerous. The bill test. Let's get specific. You open your mailbox, there's a bill you weren't expecting. Maybe it's a medical bill, maybe your car insurance went up. Maybe your bank account is thinner than you thought. Now watch what happens inside you. Watch the tightness in your chest. Watch the story your mind immediately tells. I can't afford this. Why does this always happen to me? The universe is testing me. Watch. That reaction, that contraction, that is the truest spiritual diagnostic you will ever have. Not your ability to sit in silence for an hour. Not your knowledge of Alan Watts' quotes. Not your ability to explain non-duality at a dinner party. As the Zen master Shunryu Suzuki once taught, Zen is not some kind of excitement, but concentration on our usual everyday routine. Your usual everyday routine, paying bills, washing dishes, sitting in traffic, that's where your practice either lives or dies. The mundane is the monastery you never signed up for. If this ancient wisdom is opening something in you, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of human wisdom. Because what comes next might change how you see your entire spiritual journey. And speaking of everyday moments that expose us. Kitchen sink gyaro. There's a famous story about a student who traveled across the world to study with a great Zen master. He arrived at the monastery, exhausted, expectant, ready for profound teachings. The master looked at him and asked, "Have you eaten?" The student said yes. The master replied, "Then go wash your bowl." That's it, that was the entire teaching. Wash your bowl, because enlightenment isn't somewhere else. It's not waiting for you on the other side of a 10-day silent retreat or a trip to Bali or the next spiritual bestseller. It's in the way you wash your bowl. It's in whether you can be fully present while scrubbing the pan without mentally rehearsing your next Instagram caption about mindfulness. Most spiritual people are performing consciousness, not practicing it. They're curating an aesthetic of awakening while their inner world is chaos. Brother David Steindl-Rast, the Benedictine monk, said something that cuts right to the heart of this. It is not happiness that makes us grateful, but gratefulness that makes us happy. Gratitude while washing dishes, presence while paying the electricity bill, that's where the rubber meets the road. But wait, because what comes next changes everything. The difficult talk. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about the conversation. You know the one, the conversation you've been avoiding with your partner, your parent, your friend, your boss. The one where you need to say something true that might make someone uncomfortable. The one where you need to set a boundary that might cost you love. Avoidance dressed in spiritual language is still avoidance. How many awakened people do you know who can't have a direct, honest, uncomfortable conversation? They'll tell you they're choosing peace. They'll say they're above drama. They'll claim they've transcended conflict. But what they've really done is build a spiritual fortress around their fear of rejection. Peace is not passivity. The great existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre understood this deeply. He recognized that authentic existence demands engagement with the uncomfortable, not retreat from it. Freedom is what we do with what is done to us. Real consciousness doesn't run from friction, it runs toward it with open eyes. It sits in the discomfort of a hard conversation and stays present anyway. It doesn't need the other person to validate its peace. True peace is forged in fire, not in retreat. And this leads us to something even more disturbing. Ego's disguise. Here's the part nobody wants to hear. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, spent decades studying the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, and he discovered something terrifying about spiritual people. The ego doesn't disappear through spiritual practice. It gets smarter. It learns the language, it wears the robes, it quotes Rumi and Eckhart Tolle, but underneath it's the same ego now fortified with a new identity. I am the awakened one. I am more conscious than them. I have transcended what ordinary people struggle with. Jung called this inflation, when the ego identifies with the archetype of the self and believes it has achieved wholeness. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Making the darkness conscious, not performing light on social media, not collecting crystals and calling it inner work, actually sitting with your jealousy, your pettiness, your greed, your fear, and saying, I see you, you're mine, I own you. Own your shadow. That is the work, and it brings us to our next point, one that will make you question everything you thought you knew about growth. Fire of ordinary. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus was a slave. Let that sink in. A man in chains who became one of the freest thinkers in human history. He didn't gain his wisdom on a meditation retreat. He gained it while being owned by another human being. His awakening was forged in the fire of ordinary, brutal, unglamorous life. The obstacle is the way, and the fire is the teacher. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Now contrast that with the modern spiritual seeker. They need the perfect conditions, the right incense, the guided meditation app, the quiet room, the absence of stress. Take any of that away and watch what happens. Watch the anxiety flood back in. Watch the irritability return. Watch the spiritual persona crumble the moment the Wi-Fi goes out. Fragile. Real awakening doesn't need ideal conditions. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, one of the most profound philosophical works in history, not in a monastery, but in a military tent during wartime, surrounded by death, disease, and political chaos. Chaos forges clarity. And speaking of this, what if I told you that the very thing you're running from is the gateway? Money as mirror. Let's return to the bills, because money is one of the most honest spiritual mirrors that exists. Your relationship with money reveals your relationship with yourself. Notice how many spiritual people claim to be above money while simultaneously being terrified of it. They say money is just energy while panicking about their bank balance at 3 in the morning. They say abundance is a mindset while refusing to look at their credit card statement. 1. Do you check your bank balance with peace or dread? 2. Can you spend without guilt or hoard without anxiety? 3. Do you give generously or grip tightly? Each of these questions is a spiritual diagnostic, not because money itself is spiritual, but because your reaction to it reveals the exact places where your consciousness is still asleep. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh lived this principle his entire life. He handled money, logistics, organizational politics, all of it with the same presence he brought to walking meditation. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth, dwelling deeply in the present moment. Walking on the green earth, paying your bills on the green earth, no distinction, no hierarchy, but this brings us to the deepest truth of all. Body never lies. Your mind can tell you that you've transcended. Your Instagram bio can say awakened soul, but your body never lies. The nervous system keeps the real score of your spiritual development. When that unexpected bill arrives, does your jaw clench? When your partner says something critical, does your stomach drop? When you see someone more successful than you, does your chest tighten? The body doesn't care about your philosophy. It responds to what's actually happening in your nervous system, not what you've convinced your mind to believe. Peter Levine, the pioneer of somatic experiencing, demonstrated that unprocessed trauma lives in the body long after the mind has constructed a narrative of healing. You can think you've forgiven someone, you can believe you've let go, but if your shoulders still rise to your ears when their name comes up, you haven't done the work. The body keeps the score of every unfinished conversation with reality. Mind lies, body truth. This is why somatic practices, breathwork, cold exposure, physical discipline are not extras on the spiritual path. They're the curriculum, and this leads us to the question you've been avoiding. Sacred mundane. What if I told you that the most sacred moment of your entire day isn't when you close your eyes to meditate? What if the most sacred moment is when you open your eyes and walk into the kitchen to make breakfast for your kids? Every ordinary moment is an altar waiting for your presence. The great mystic Meister Eckhart, a medieval theologian who was nearly declared a heretic for his radical ideas, understood this better than almost anyone. The soul is not in the body, but the body is in the soul. The body is in the soul, which means every act your body performs, every bill it pays, every dish it washes, every difficult conversation it sits through is a spiritual act. There is no separation between the sacred and the mundane. That separation is the last illusion your ego clings to. It says, this is spiritual and this is just regular life. But the awakened eye sees no such division. When you eliminate the gap between sacred and ordinary, awakening has nowhere to hide. The Bhagavad Gita captures this perfectly when Krishna tells Arjuna that the path of action performed without attachment is itself liberation. You don't need to escape your life to find God. Your life is where God has been waiting for you all along. Sacred in the mundane. And now for the truth that ties everything together. The real test. So here's the final truth. The real spiritual test was never about how deep you can meditate. It was never about how many books you've read or retreats you've attended or teachers you've studied with. Never. The real test is this. Can you remain conscious when life is inconvenient? Can you remain present when your plans fall apart? Can you remain loving when the person in front of you is being genuinely difficult? Can you remain aware when your body is tired, your bank account is low, and nobody is watching you be spiritual? Awakening without endurance is just a pleasant daydream. Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable horrors of Auschwitz, proved that consciousness can survive anything. Not because he transcended his suffering, but because he stayed present inside of it. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our freedom and our power to grow. That space, that tiny gap between the bill arriving and your reaction, between the insult and your response, between the fear and your next breath. That space is where awakening actually lives, not on the cushion, not in the ashram, in the space between stimulus and response. So now you know, enlightenment means nothing if it crumbles at the first sight of a bill or a difficult conversation. The meditation cushion was always just the rehearsal. The real performance is your life. Every bill you pay, every awkward silence you sit through, every moment of fear you face without running, that is your spiritual practice. Not the candles, not the mantras, not the retreats. Life is the practice. The ancient masters knew this. Epictetus knew it in chains. Marcus Aurelius knew it in war. Frankl knew it in Auschwitz, and now you know it too. The question is no longer whether you're awake. The question is whether you're willing to stay awake when it's uncomfortable, unglamorous, and nobody is applauding you for it. Your next bill is your next meditation session. If you made it this far, comment conscious fire to prove your awakening isn't just a performance. The wisdom of the ages is yours. Use it well. If this unlocked something in you, subscribe for more. The vault has more. Like this video if you want to go deeper.